Hi, I'm Pastor Lou, and I do hope you're well. This is the first Bible I ever owned. I got it from my father when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I asked for it for my birthday. Hi, Caleb.
Hi.
And he was not really involved in the church at the time. Our family wasn't involved, but he was a man who was deeply sensitive to the presence of God in his life anyway. But we didn't really talk about faith. And when he gave this to me, he wrote a note, and I remember him using the word mushy, and he apologized that he really never talked about these things. He was a very soft-spoken man when it came to things like this, and I'll never forget getting this, and I'll never forget how quietly he talked about it. And yet it eventually became an object of conversation in our family as we all grew up together. Contrast that with the story of Stephen in chapter 7, at the end of chapter 7 in the book of Acts, where Stephen is making a defense for Christianity before a lot of the angry religious leaders, and he was really doing a good job of talking about them and winning the crowd over. But then at the end, he starts yelling at them and accusing them of being hypocrites, and he talked about how their fathers had killed the prophets who talked about Jesus, whom they now wanted to kill, and killed. And it made them angry, and they ended up stoning him to death. And it just seems like there are two approaches to talking about one's faith, or at least two ends of a spectrum about talking about your faith. There's my dad on the one hand, which did it with sensitivity and a lot of quietness. And then there's Stephen, who I just wonder if he could have been more effective had he not been so much in their face.
Hey, Pastor Lou.
Hey there, Jen.
Hi, guys.
She's my wife.
What are you guys talking about today?
We're talking about our faith.
Oh.
Different ways of doing it.
There sure are different ways of doing it. I know when I grew up in a very outspoken tradition, very evangelical in its roots. And I remember knocking on doors and talking to people that way.
Were you like in your face about it, or did you do it?
I don't know that I was in my face about it, in people's faces about it, but I was very persistent. And as I grew up and my faith journey developed a lot and changed a lot, I feel like I've gone through a lot of different phases in that experience. And I feel like at this point in my life, my conversations about my faith are all very organic and very much more a celebration of who I am and what I'm experiencing with God, rather than a attempt to convince somebody that I'm right about what I believe, or they're not right, or even to try and convince them what I believe is better for them than what they believe. So it's an interesting evolution. I wonder if Stephen would have gotten there had he not gotten stoned.
But you're not afraid to talk about your faith with other people?
No, not at all. Not if it comes up. But I'm not going to be like somebody's cooking dinner and be like, so let me tell you about faith. Or
right.
I'm shopping with someone at the mall. That's something that we used to do before the pandemic. I just don't see a reason to insert it in an artificial way to try and prove a point that makes me feel better about me and doesn't do much good for them in the end.
Right. Well, and
Hello, let me tell you about faith.
Yes, tell me about faith. Well, I always am reminded of scripture passages. I mean, before as a pastor, as a professional biblical scholar, and I think of what it says in 1 Peter, where the writer is telling the people to always be prepared to make an account for your faith, but to do it with gentleness and reverence. And so often I hear people who, like you said, want to demonstrate the rightness of what they believe at the expense of other people. And at that point, they lose that sense of gentleness toward other people or reverence for their life and for their beliefs. So there are, different approaches.
For sure. For sure. There are ways to find peace in sharing your faith
There are.
with other people.
Right.
And there are ways to create chaos.
Yeah.
I choose peace.
Sounds good to me. Have peace.
Be well.
Yep, be well.